Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here on this beautiful day. Wow. Welcome to the new year and a new reading for today. Good to see all of you guys here. The Jaybefaunt channel is available on all major podcast platforms. So go ahead and subscribe to me there. Also part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. So you can find me there on Sundays and Thursdays. So good to see all of you here. If you guys have not already, you guys can also go to my Substack at jaybefaunt.substack.com so you guys can be notified whenever I upload clips, have live streams, or if I post any articles. So you can go there as well. Thank you so very much to all the people who are watching today. And what are we getting into today? It's going to be interesting. As you guys have noticed in the title, you guys know that we have been reading this book for the last couple of months. So we're going to go into chapter 5, part 3 of Laziness Does Not Exist by Dr. Devon Price. This is one of my new favorite books, and I cannot wait to get into it with you guys. So if you guys remember, as far as this book is concerned, in chapter 5, some of the things that we were going over was just really interesting, especially about the type of information that we absorb, right? That is also deeply important because a lot of times we feel like we have to be an expert on everything. We feel like we have to know everything, but we don't necessarily have to. And so this is something that Dr. Devon Price has actually been talking about. And as we went into this, we talked about information overload, which is also extremely important, especially what we've been seeing since the beginning of October. A lot of us have actually been diving into that information regarding what's going on in the Middle East, in particular, what's going on in Gaza between Hamas and Israel. So we have been diving into that information, trying to be more accurate. So, we've been going through that. And a lot of times what we go through is we go through that secondhand trauma that was talked about in chapter 5, about how a lot of times we don't actually have to necessarily go through the trauma ourselves, but we can experience trauma secondhand by hearing a lot of the news. And this happens to a lot of us that have deep empathetic feelings, and so it can affect us in negative ways. And so we have to be very measured in how we go about this. But that was a lot of the gist of going through chapter 5, part 2. Now we're going into part 1 and part 2. So we're going into chapter 5, part 3. And chapter 5, part 3 is we're now going into the different other tools in setting information limits. We're going to be starting on skim the headlines, then move on. So this is where we're going to be starting, and away we go. Another step Demasili Mitron recommends is reading the news in a surface level way. Rather than absorbing every fact about every story as it develops, she suggests merely skimming the news each day to get a general sense of what's going on. After you know the broad strokes of what's happening, you should move on and focus on your own life. I encourage people to just, read the headline, Louise says. And unless it's about a topic that you're really involved with, just do that. Just go, okay, I know what's going on. So now I'm going to do my work. Of course, we all have issues that are especially close to our hearts. Even though I block transphobic bigots on Twitter, I do want to be well informed on issues related to trans people's rights and safety. For those situations, Louise suggests making a deep dive on a couple of topics at most, the ones a person has the time and energy to actually address. I recommend to people that if you have something that's really touches you, some issue that really matters to you, maybe it's climate change, maybe it's domestic violence, whatever it is, you focus on the one or two things that really touch you and then get involved with addressing those things. This can also be what's going on in Gaza, especially if you're talking about Palestinian rights and Palestinian liberation. If that's something that you want to focus heavily on, okay, focus on that and maybe a couple other things. But you don't have to be the hero that saves everybody from everything. You got to remember, you're not the only human being on this planet. You're not the only human being that is also trying to help and advocate for causes that are necessary. Because you could be trying to help out homelessness, and there may be somebody who may be trying to mitigate the climate change issue, and you both are doing admirable things for the future of humanity. But you don't have to dive headfirst into every single issue. And that person doesn't either. You guys can take your issues, almost kind of like a niche, and then dive headfirst into those. Maybe collaborate, and just do that. But you don't have to exhaust yourself into being in every single issue. This advice reduces the amount of information a person has to take in. It also addresses the problem of bad news making us feel helpless. If we direct our energy and attention to only a handful of issues and also take proactive steps to address those issues in the real world, we can begin to feel less overwhelmed. By focusing on the small fires that we can help put out with our own activism, we can stop feeling that the world is constantly blazing garbage fire. Basically, like for instance, take me for an example. What am I doing on the ground with the Orlando chapter? We are doing trying to help out the unhoused people within our area in Orlando. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to stick to that, focus on that, grow so that we can have more members of the group, so that we can build a mutual aid apparatus to especially help out the most disenfranchised in our area. Some people, it could be renters' rights. For some people, it could be doing things like ballot initiatives, right? For some, it could be peace marches or anti-war protests and trying to push the anti-war agenda, not just within the confines of our elected officials, but also trying to get the word out to other people to let them know, hey, this is what's going on. This is what our country is doing. There's so many different things that we all can be doing, but we all don't have to be in every single one. Just you see a fire in that area, you put that small fire out. There are many other people behind you that also see other fires that they're also trying to put out. Don't try to put them all out yourself. And then team up with other people to help you put out that small fire. See, this is the thing. And one of the things I just have to say this, because this is one of the issues with living in a capitalist system, is that we're so individualistic in our thinking that we think that we have to suddenly become an expert on everything all within ourselves, when in reality, we could depend on the expertise of other people. Find out what we can find out, do what we can do, but realize that as one person, we have our own limitations, and realize that we also need to attack the world's issues collectively instead of doing it head on, singularly by ourselves. That's the point. And we have to get out of this I don't need anybody else's help mindset. If that was the case, humanity would be one person, but it's not. It's a huge collective of millions upon millions of people. And we can all do this together. So let's continue. So the next one Dr. Devon Price brings attention to is resist comment section culture. Looking at you, YouTube. Let's get into it. Comment sections are popular. They capture a lot of interest and clicks. A survey by the Engaging News Project found that 53.3% of Americans regularly write online comments on news stories and read the comments of other people leave. Yet, despite the popularity of comment sections, many people report finding them to be aggravating and stressful spaces. Comment sections exist because they increase traffic to a website and boost loyalty to a site's brand. If a news article has no comment section, the average person will only ever visit that article one time to read it. However, when an article has a comment section below it, the same people may return to that page dozens of times, checking for new comments, replying to people, and maybe even getting swept up in an hours-long internet fight. Starting to make sense now? Every time someone returns to the article to leave a new comment, they're giving the site a new page view. More page views means higher advertising revenue. As a result, most sites have a vested interest in stirring up controversy with outlandish clickbait headlines, getting tons of outraged comments, and letting commenters fight with one another for hours on end. It is all a ploy to get you mad, to get you riled up, to get you keep coming back. Why do you think some people on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, they will say some of the most outlandish, wildest things, and then they get millions of views, hundreds of thousands of comments, a bunch of likes. And guess what? They're monetized on some of these things. Guess what? They're making money off your anger, off of your vitriol. That's the way it works. Most people report that they leave comments in order to express how they're feeling, not to learn from other people or to be persuaded. People like Noah and me got pulled into meaningless internet fights at times, but it almost never seems in our learning anything new or reaching anybody who wants to be educated. Comment sections are designed to manipulate our emotions. They encourage compulsive, angry use. So stop looking at them and start having private, one-on-one conversations with people you disagree with instead. If you really want to make a strong point, write an essay or post of your own. Don't give attention to people who just want to make others incensed. If that proves difficult, there are apps like Shut Up Comment Blocker, which hide the comment sections of most sites. There's a site called Medium, where if you want to put your thoughts down, you can use that. There's also Substack. Shout out to Katie Lewis, who has been on my channel a couple times. He writes on his Substacks. So instead of writing in comment sections, he writes on his Substack. And you can monetize it. So therefore, your opinions can actually pay you instead of going back and forth with somebody in the comment section for free. Just saying. I do it. By the way, let me wet my whistle with another drink of tea. This tea is good. Man, I made some good tea. And lots of lemon too. How you like your tea? Put in the comments section below and tell me how you like your tea. But this isn't anything for vitriol or anything like that. It's just I want to know how you like your tea. Or do you even drink tea? Let me know. Next tip here. Don't read the news before bed. Research shows that excessive news watching, particularly coverage of traumatic events, is linked to an increase in anxiety symptoms. The same is true of online news consumption. Frequent exposure increases fear and distorts a person's perceptions of how dangerous their surroundings are. Look, let me tell you something. How many people have you walked and talked to? And you talk about your kids, you be like, "Oh yeah, I don't let my kids go outside." You see, you know how crazy this world is. I read so and such happened. I saw on the news that such and such happened. When in reality, it was just reported that 2023 was actually one of the most peaceful years on record. Our crime rate has actually been dropping over the last decade, and yet everybody is more afraid of each other than ever before. Why? Why? If it bleeds, it leads. That's why. Let's continue. These findings have led to some wellness experts, such as clinical professor of internal medicine Andrew Weil, to recommend taking regular news fasts. According to Weil, a news fast should be between a few days and a week. During the fast period, a person should try to focus on their present reality and surroundings. What Louise Mitran recommends is a bit more tempered and perhaps a bit easier to pull off. Just don't read the news before bed. After all, there's nothing you can do to address the social problem while you're lying anxious in bed. I will add an addendum, whatever. I'll add an addition to that. If you read good news before bed, that can have a positive effect on you. It's either don't read any news before bed or only read good news. There is a good news website. If you just Google like good news stories, the website will pop up. I think it's like the first one. And just read some of the good news that's coming out of that website. If you want to read news, read good news. Or don't read any news at all before bed. Or watch something funny. Watch something that makes you laugh before bed. Right? Or, I don't know, cute animals, puppies, kittens. If you're into reptiles. I'm not into reptiles, but okay. But yeah, you know, I just don't think it's healthy. And to constantly know all the details of everything that bad that's going on in the world, Louise says. And the details are so ugly lately. I think they've always been. But we didn't always have access to the kinds of information that we have now. In some ways, the concept of a news fast reminds me of Fred Bryant's research on the dampening happiness, worrying constantly about worst case scenarios that may or may not come to pass is a surefire way to distract us from enjoying our present lives. It is much healthier for a person to live in the current moment and focus on their attention on information that's truly useful to them and the local problems they can address. There has to be a balance. There has to be moments where we live in the moment. We can't always have our head in the clouds. Trust me, I know. I have my head in the clouds a lot. Sometimes it's important to be in the moment and to not have your worries carry you away, right? Take that from me. Next subheading, consume less information more meaningfully. This is going to be interesting. When we first encounter a new fact or idea, our brains review it in a very surface level way. In my field, social psychology, it is often said that the first step to understanding something is assuming it's true. We tend to be a bit gullible and uncritical when we're first introduced to a new idea. It's only by taking the time to reflect on a new knowledge that we can really make deeper sense of it. When we spend time carefully pondering information, we're able to reevaluate our pre-existing opinions, discover the holes in someone's argument, or see a familiar idea in a completely new light. Research sometimes call this process elaboration. It takes a lot of energy and attention to elaborate on new information. When a person is distracted, tired, or suffering from serious information overload, they can't really elaborate on anything new. Taking a slower, more contemplative approach to learning can help us be more thoughtful and critical, and can help us reduce anxiety. As an educator, I've noticed that when I try to make my students memorize too much information at once, they end up understanding almost none of it. But when I slowly work through the lesson and give people plenty of time to digest it, discuss it, and even challenge it, they can come to comprehend it in a more lasting, personal way. What matters is the quality and intentionality behind our efforts, not how hard we're pushing and pressuring ourselves. Here are a few steps a person can take if they want to consume less information in a more meaningful way. Chew your food, right? Information is like food. If you just take it in, take it in, take it in, without actually chewing it, without actually getting the nutrients and the beginning of the digestion process, then what happens? You get what? Indigestion. We can experience a mental indigestion by taking in so much information so fast, but then it's like you didn't even eat it all because you didn't get a chance to really taste the food, to really absorb the nutrients, and to really comprehend what you ate. It's just like sitting in front of a TV when you're eating. Yeah, you're eating, but at the same time, what happens? You didn't even realize that what you were eating, you didn't get a chance to actually sit and really ruminate over what you were eating and enjoy what you were eating. And this is why sometimes things may taste better when you're at somebody else's house, especially if you're just in the company of friends and you're not being distracted, or if you're at a restaurant and you're not being distracted by anything and you're really more focused on the food. Sometimes it just tastes better. Why? Because you're literally paying attention to what you're eating. This goes to the same thing about when it comes to your information. When you take the time to take in the information at a more slower, deliberate pace, you are better able to absorb the information that you are taking in. And did you just notice that I just did the same thing to you just now? Are you paying attention? Did you like the stream? Go ahead, give it a like. I'll wait for you. Thank you. Let's continue. Practice active reading. Okay, so this is the next one. Active reading is the exact opposite of frantic doom scrolling so many of us do online, right? How many of us are scrolling on Twitter, looking at all this bad news that's coming at us that we feel like we almost have to dodge now, right? Okay, instead of trying to take in as much information as quickly as you can, you work to slowly and intentionally break down small passages. This increases your odds of meaningfully processing what you've read. I recommend active reading to many of my students, especially the ones who are taking classes after many years of being away from school. But it's really an invaluable technique that can benefit anybody. Active reading, something involves using the following 6 skills. Now, 1, visualize what the text is describing. After reading a paragraph, sit back and try to create a mental picture of what you just read. For complex or scientific topics, consider looking up videos or charts to help you visualize the phenomenon being described, or try drawing the chart yourself. So, YouTube is great for this, right? So if you want to do some complex concepts that may be in science, information, technology, math, things like that, you can always go to YouTube, watch the videos on it so you can actually visualize what's going on, right? But a lot of times, especially if you're reading news stories, you can actually picture in your head what's really going on, right? 2, clarifying using passages in unfamiliar terms. Slow down to read something if it's unclear. Write down words or terms you don't know, and then take a moment at the end of each page to look up their definitions. I do this. Sometimes there'll be a word that I do not understand, that I don't know. And if I'm on my computer, I'll just highlight it, right click, Google search, and it'll come up the definition, and I can read the definition. And then what I'll do is I'll read that passage again, and instead of reading the word, I'll read the definition and as that word, and then continue on so that I can absorb and get better information from it. 3, question the author's assumptions and point of view. Consider why the writer chose to use the examples they're using. Look at the writer's sources and see if they seem trustworthy. Ponder what the author's goal is for the piece of writing. 4, predict what will come next. At the end of each section, jot down a few thoughts about what you hope the piece will touch on next. What lingering questions do you have? See if you can anticipate where the author is going. 5, connect the writing to things you already know. Does this piece of writing line up with what you already believed, or does it not? What are some other subjects or topics that it seems relevant to? Who else might find this writing interesting? 6, evaluate the qualities of the writing. Was the writing persuasive? Did you find it easy to follow? This seemed to represent the facts fairly. Even if you disagree with the author's conclusions, can you understand where they're coming from? It is easy to get distracted by the constant stream of information that the internet provides us, and to develop bad reading habits. Like anybody else, I can feel tempted to race through as many articles as possible, cramming my brain with superficial facts I haven't taken the time to really contemplate. If, like me, you sometimes struggle with information overload, you can fall back on these methods to slow down and process things with greater intention. Great tips, right? Wet my whistle again. Let's go. Mm-mm-mm. Mm. Have a real-time conversation. This is going to be an important one, so stay tuned for this one. The internet provides endless opportunities to argue with other people and to be misunderstood. I'm going to read that again. The internet provides endless opportunities to argue with other people and to be misunderstood. Too much online arguing can actually make a person less willing to open up to someone they disagree with. Because it gives them an overly pessimistic view of how other conversations will go. Mm. Experimental research shows that when two people speak privately about a disagreement, they feel much greater satisfaction than when they speak to someone in a public online venue, such as a comment section. They also feel more emotionally close to their conversation partner and are more likely to share personal information. The warmth and emotional complexity of a real time conversation can help two people reach a common ground they disagree with and can foster feelings of friendship and mutual respect. Sam learned this recently when they met up with their sister following a big fight via text message. Sam and their sister often get into spats via text. I tell my sister that it would be nice to see her at my Christmas party, Sam says, and she'll think I'm being passive aggressive or sarcastic. Even if I add a smiley face, she'll think I'm doing it to mock her. Then again, I do the exact same thing to her. Every little message gets under my skin. Despite all the hurt feelings and resentments that have brought tensions to the relationship, one of the, once the two of them are face to face, Sam feels much more at ease. Once I'm actually looking at my sister and spending time with her, I can't maintain the terrible version of her that I've created in my mind, Sam says. In a real in re- in real life, she apologizes if she says something in a rude way. She laughs, then says things that are awkward in this way that's totally lovable. I can't stay angry at her and that I stay sorry, can't read today. I can't stay angry at her the way I could if I were texting from miles away, stewing over old arguments. Taking online conflict out of the real world can really help diffuse tension and clarify confusion. If you can't meet in person, try switching from a cold medium like text to a warm one, such as a video conference. This method has helped me to calm down panicked students and fighting coworkers in the past. Like Sam and their sister, most people have a harder time staying angry when they can see and hear the person they're speaking to. Have you ever text messaged somebody and you read what they said in a different way than they actually intended? Case in point, you're so crazy. You're so crazy. You're so crazy. I just gave you 3 different examples of different emotions and feelings, right? Just by saying the same words over and over. But you don't get that intentionality if I just typed it down and just sent it to you through a cold medium like text messaging. But you're seeing me, you're seeing my facial expressions, you're hearing the inflections in my voice, and you're able to understand the meaning. A lot of times when it comes to communication, our body language also is a part of conveying what we want to say without words. This is why, through a warm medium, like what you're doing right now, is important. Because now you can see and hear what I'm saying so that you know exactly what I mean. So, could we start doing more, you know, video chats, going to people in person, having discussions, connecting more with individuals rather than just going through text messages a lot. And I know this is kind of difficult for introverts, right? Those of us who are introverted, we kind of want to either preserve our social battery, but you got to remember, batteries are meant to be used. If they go down, if they drain a little bit, that's okay. Retreat back and refill. So try to do that a little bit more often. You'll find your relationships they get a little bit more closer. They feel a little bit more warmer. This piece of advice won't work for all conflicts, of course. If I'm fighting online with a neo-Nazi or someone who believes women are inherently inferior to men, I'm not going to have a better time speaking with them face to face. Damn straight. There are some disagreements in which a reasonable peace cannot or should not ever be found. Like with fascists? No, hell no. But when a disagreement isn't a life and death issue and both parties do want to understand each other, speaking in person or in real time can do wonders to de-escalate conflict. Next tip, get comfortable with not knowing. The absolute best way to combat the urge to overconsume information is to get comfortable with not knowing everything. In a world poisoned by the laziness lie, the pressure to constantly improve ourselves is immense. Many of us want to fill our every waking moment with work, achievement, and development of new skills. The more we strive to be productive and to improve ourselves, the logic goes, the more value we bring to society. Yet our minds need time to recharge, and our lives are more vibrant and pleasurable when we have time that isn't focused on being productive. Remember when I talked about this all the time, is that you have inherent value. Your value should not be necessarily gauged on how much you produce. Same thing goes for this. Being more deliberate in what you take in, taking it in slower. Sometimes your value isn't that you know everything, but that you're an expert in one thing or two things. But you still have inherent value nonetheless, right? On top of all that, it is arrogant and unrealistic for us to expect ourselves to be well versed in all topics. A much healthier approach is to be humble about our limitations. And this is where we have to start thinking about our ego. You have to throw that away. You have to realize that we have limitations, and that's okay because we're human beings. You don't have to be an expert in everything. On the internet, we are constantly asked to share our opinion. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram all entice us to share what we're up to and what we're thinking about. Nearly every website has a comment section begging us to sound off and share our views. Comment culture has taught us to speak more than we listen. I'm going to repeat that. Comment culture has taught us to speak more than we listen. To form an opinion based only on a headline, and to rush into a conversation when we lack relevant expertise. We don't have to sound off on every issue under the sun. That sentence reminds me of the phrase, you do not have to attend every single argument you're invited to. Keep that in mind. If somebody says some crazy, outlandish things online, you don't have to respond. You don't have to entertain them with a response. You don't even have to know the answer to that. We can choose to read slowly and think before we speak. As all research shows, taking a more intentional, open minded approach to these matters helps a person to experience less stress. It also makes us better citizens and more responsible consumers of information. Knowledge can empower us, but only when we take time to wield it responsibly. That's the point. Next subheading: focus on what you can control. In January of 2020, Noah and I had a fight via email about which steps individuals should take in order to mitigate climate change. Noah was dismayed by how little his friends and coworkers were willing to alter their lives in order to help the environment. I'm so frustrated by this super pervasive feeling. I'm so frustrated by this super pervasive thing I see all over lefty progressive spaces, he wrote, of emphasizing over and over that it's too late for individual choices around the environment to matter. I still don't see how the fact absolves us of any responsibility to look at what we could do differently. I told Noah that I understood why people felt dejected and powerless in the fight against climate change. It's challenging, time consuming, and expensive to make eco friendly choices. And even if I commit to an entire lifetime of green behaviors, it could all be overridden by the environmental damage a single billionaire does in a day. In addition to that, the news on climate change often makes it seem like a foregone conclusion. Under those circumstances, didn't it make sense? I'm sorry, didn't it make sense that people had checked out from the fight? I get it. This is a problem that can't be solved by individual choices, Noah replied. But my point is that this is the only issue I can think of where people actively discourage each other from taking steps to address it. Noah and I went back and forth on this for a while. He argued that society needs to do more to educate people and to encourage them to behave in ecologically sound ways. I claimed that it would be nearly impossible to motivate people to make changes because the news presented this looming abstract fear no one person has any control over. Eventually, we stopped the email thread because it was getting a bit heated. I walked away from the conversation certain I was right. Then the pandemic C-19 hit. I got to be careful how I say things on YouTube, unfortunately. I was astonished by how rapidly and selflessly the people around me responded. Long before any of them were legally required to, my friends and neighbors started isolating themselves. Local theaters and bars canceled performances in order to reduce crowding. Restaurants began offering free food delivery to the elderly people and newly unemployed. People placed loving but firm pressure on those who refused to socially distance. This swift, expansive response rose up in a matter of days and took effect long before our state and local government started requiring us to isolate. Like climate change, C-19 began as a mostly abstract fear. Like climate change, the virus was terrifying to think about, and we knew serious damage was inevitable. The news presented us with dozens of apocalyptic seeming projections of how the C-19 disaster might play out, just as they do with climate change. Yet individual people rapidly started making responsible, altruistic choices to address the pandemic, despite having spent years doing comparatively little to address climate change. Why? I think the difference is that with the coronavirus, people felt empowered to make a meaningful choice. As the virus spread, fear ramped up, but so did knowledge about which proactive steps a person could take to minimize disaster. The news coverage of worst case scenarios, such as how brutally the virus hit Italy, filled people with terror. But the response of countries like South Korea and Taiwan provided crucial, motivating counterexamples. China did pretty good too. In countries where people took the pandemic seriously, Thousands of lives were spared. We weren't just being fed messages of doom, we were also given hope. Though each of us was terrified by the onslaught of bad news about C-19, we also knew where to look for advice about how to respond. The steps we needed to take were clear and feasible, and we knew that everyone else was taking them. Stay inside, wear a mask, deliver groceries to elderly people around you, keep at least 6 feet away. This advice was widely spread by the news media as much as the doom and gloom projections were. Instead of paralyzing us with anxiety, the news called us into action. Most of us gladly answered that call and found solace in the fact that we were the elements of this massive that there were elements of this massive problem we could actually control. 2 weeks into the pandemic, I emailed Noah and told him I took back everything I said about hopeless fighting climate change seemed. Individuals are capable of coming together and making a difference, I told him. They just have to believe that their choices matter and that they're not alone in making them. Information can be used to motivate and inspire. Knowledge can be shared in a way that encourages critical thought and careful decision making rather than prejudice and panic. The internet has gotten us addicted to a constant drip of low quality information, but we can refuse to be overwhelmed into passivity. It is not lazy to draw limits on the amount and type of information we consume. Doing so is actually an essential public service. That's it for chapter 5. What do you guys think? Is there any, tips that you guys can take in? What are some of the tips that you guys can take in to improve how you take in this information so that you can improve your mental and emotional health? Because the key is not to not take in any information and to learn and to focus on certain issues that we would like to change in the world, is to limit and be more keenly focused on a small set of issues that are closest to your heart and then work on those, right? I think that's the point. So some of us, it may be these other issues. Don't be bombarded with a whole host of them. You can only balance. It is easier to balance 1, 2, or maybe 3 spinning plates. Remember seeing the spinning plates where you balance them? It gets more difficult to balance when you get to 5, 6, 7, 8 plates that you're spinning. So now you have to keep spinning, and eventually something's going to fall. It's the same thing. You focus on the couple of spinning plates that you can, and then you allow collectively other people to spin other plates too. So then, even though you're only spinning maybe 2, maybe 3 plates, right? Each person is spinning maybe 2 or 3 plates, and you have a collective group. Next thing you know, you got 50 plates spinning. So that's the point. Realize your limitations as a human, but also be more collective minded as well. I think that's important. Did you like the stream? Go ahead and give the stream a like. For Jaybefaunt deliciousness, absolutely. Share and subscribe too. Go ahead, do it. Do the damn thing. Anyway, thank you so very much as well. If you guys would like to also read some of my articles on Substack, you guys can go to jaybefaunt.substack.com so you guys can go there. Also, just want to give a beautiful shout out to all the patrons on Patreon, Coffee, and anybody that sends me any type of mutual aid. Thank you so very much. For without you guys, I would not be able to do this without you guys. So thank you so very much. I really need to work on just like redoing this whole page, but I'll get to it eventually. But thank you so very much for that. And yes, I am demonetized right now. So if you guys would like to, you guys can support the channel by going to Patreon or PayPal to support the channel. It is deeply appreciated very much. And just so that you guys know, here are the tiers on my Patreon if you guys would like to subscribe. So just to share with you guys, here we go. We have JB members, Solidarity, Comrades, Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters, and Mega Jaybefaunters. So thank you so very much for your support. And I would like to give a shout out to new patrons on Patreon. We have Bunnytown and Sabiha Kazi. Thank you so very much for becoming patrons on Patreon. It means the world, and it literally keeps the lights on. Look, it keeps the lights on. It keeps, boom, the lights on. Ha! See? Thank you so very much as well. So, with that being said, I would just like to thank you all for tuning in to this reading. This is the first content of 2024, and I'm so glad to be starting out with learning and reading with all of you. And if you guys would like to, you guys can go to the playlist and go to Laziness Does Not Exist, and you guys can see all the readings from the introduction all the way to now, so you guys can get that. And there's also other books that I'm reading, and I will be also getting into new books this year as well. Look, I got this book, The Will to Change by Bell Hooks. It says men, masculinity, and love. Ooh, wait, this is going to be a good one. I can't wait to get into this. I'm going to get into this. And there's another book I'm going to be doing. Somebody recommended to me on my Patreon, so I'm going to try to get into that too. Shout out to you as well. Sorry, I'm blanking on your name, but I will also get into that too. But yeah, I'm excited to get into these new books. It's going to be a learning experience, and I'm trying to get myself to a point where I can read W.E.B. Du Bois. I want to read him, and I also want to read Marx. So I'm going to try to get into those books as well and be more dedicated to getting to the readings more diligently. But thank you so much for being patient with me as I improve myself and better myself on this channel. And thank you so very much for your support. Thank you for the likes. Thank you for the beautiful comments. And look, Happy New Year to every single one of you. And yeah, so like I always say, water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it. Smoking if you got them, drinking if you got them. If you ain't got them, then watch something funny because joy is revolutionary, or read something because reading is fundamental. I love you all for watching. Thank you so very much and have a beautiful. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention forehead kisses because you joined me today. Thank you so very much. Bye bye, Miss American Pie.